Hello, my name is Ginny Phillips, and I'm another student employee at the Ward Beecher Planetarium, and I'm really excited to bring you the third installment of Life of a Scientist. This time, I would like to talk about a theoretical physicist that changed my life and the lives of many others, Stephen Hawking. And when I was younger, I decided to study physics because of his work, and I think of him every single time I look up at the stars. He's very inspirational, and I hold him and his story very close to my heart. So to begin, I'll talk about his younger years. So Stephen Hawking is considered to have one of the most brilliant minds that ever were. He settled the dust of some of the most difficult mathematical problems that the world has ever had to offer. He continued Albert Einstein's work and provided the scientific community with an astounding theory surrounding his work on black holes. Though, his early years weren't always the best, right? Stephen Hawking's background didn't necessarily scream world-changing theoretical physicist, right? So he grew up during one of the darkest times that we know of, World War II. He was born on January 8th, 1942, right? And his childhood was spent in and around Oxfordshire in England, right? So that was kind of the epicenter of that war that was going on. Though the war was raging around them, his childhood was relatively normal. His family moved around a bit, and Stephen was spending most of his time playing with his friends in the English countryside and on the playground, right? But he preferred problem solving. He was always fascinated about how the world worked around him, and this fascination brought him into the work that he has done in his life. In an interview, he highlighted the memories from his early years, where his friends would debate about the issues of the world and how things worked, as little kids. Even at a young age, he would rather put his interest into solving problems instead of playing on the playground all the time. And later on, he commented saying, "If you understand how the universe operates, you control it in a way." His passion for natural sciences pushed his career forward. So, such a brilliant mind must have had a prestigious introduction to the school system, right? Well, young Hawking wasn't necessarily the most focused student growing up. He excelled in his classes, though his enthusiasm for natural sciences wasn't met by his teachers or his father. Eventually, he got into a higher class regime in his school simply because they thought it was the best thing to do, and not necessarily because he worked very hard. His passions, though, lied in physics, math, and other natural science subjects, right? And even though he didn't struggle with his studies, he did struggle following his passions, as his father didn't necessarily agree with what he wanted to do. So Stephen wanted to be a mathematician and was heavily inspired by Galileo. His father, on the other hand, told him on many occasions that there were no jobs for mathematicians. He was a bit relentless on him about studying medicine instead. Well, medicine was his father's area of study, which was probably his motive behind his tight press on Stephen's future. Though, Stephen wasn't the type to back down, he is very strong-willed. He continued striving for this passion for natural science, physics, and mathematics, and set off into the path that he chose for himself, even though his father didn't necessarily agree with him. And he eventually attended the University College in Oxford at the age of 17 in 1959. It's quite a young age to go to college, so he was very, very strong-willed and passionate about his studies. Though his father did not see eye to eye with him about his area of study, but he did appease some of the tension between them by attending his father's preferred college. Right? So, as time went on, the years got a little harder for him, right? It wasn't always, perfect. The ensuing years would be some of the greatest, right? But some of the most challenging for Stephen. His college career flourished, and he was studying what he always wanted to. The college wasn't the only love in his life, because later on he met his future wife, Jane Wilde. So everything was perfect for Stephen for a little while, but things seemed to come to a crashing halt when he started to have trouble moving around, and they couldn't necessarily figure out what was going on at first. And a series of tests were run over time, and he was unfortunately diagnosed with ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, in 1963, right? So some of you may know ALS is a disease that results in the loss of motor neurons that control voluntary muscle movements. So it was really hard for him to control his walking and stuff like that. And it eventually paralyzed him, and he was confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his days. He was given a tragic life expectancy of 2 years after he was diagnosed. And at this time, it was the prime of his life. He had a beautiful girl by his side. He was working on his graduate thesis in the area of study that he always wanted to study. But this was probably the hardest time of his life. And he thought about the future of his thesis and his work. He probably asked himself every day if he feels like he should continue. Why continue a graduate thesis if you only had 2 years to live? But even though the odds were stacked against him, he decided to press on, and he outlived his life expectancy by a number of years. And he commented about it too. He said once in an interview saying, "It is a waste of time to be angry about my disability. One has to get on with life, and I haven't done badly. People won't have time for you if you're always angry or complaining." He was really good at finding the light in every situation, which makes him a very inspirational personality. So eventually, he completed his thesis in theoretical cosmology and changed the scientific community forever. And then later on, he decided to marry Jane and had 3 children between 1967 and 1979. His children were named Robert, Lucy, and Timothy. So, even though he had all of these problems, he still decided that living the best life he possibly could was more important. And he left the troubles that he was faced with in life far behind. Stephen Hawking is a true testament to the saying, if you can do anything, set your mind to it and you will be able to do it. He never gave up on his passions despite the lack of support in his early years. And he was dealt some very heavy blows in his life. And even through everything, through thick and thin, he kept pushing through. He accomplished everything that he wanted to do in life and more, even though he was only given a few years to live after being diagnosed with a serious health issue. And unfortunately, no one can live forever, and he recently passed on March 14th in 2018. But he left a legacy behind him. If we can all learn anything from Mr. Hawking, it's that you can do anything in life, and that if you just keep pushing, you will be able to make it through and follow all of your dreams.
We will map the positions of billions of galaxies, and we will better understand our place in the universe. But we must also continue to go into space for the future of humanity. I don't think we will survive another 1,000 years without escaping beyond our fragile planet. It has been a glorious time to be alive, doing research in theoretical physics. The fact that we humans, who are ourselves mere collections of fundamental particles of nature, have been able to come this close to an understanding of the laws governing us and our universe, is a great triumph, and I'm happy if I have made a small contribution. I want to share my excitement and enthusiasm about this quest. So remember to look up at the stars and not down at your feet. Try to make sense of what you see, and wonder about what makes the universe exist. Be curious. And however difficult life may seem, there is always something you can do and succeed at. It matters that you don't just give up. While there's life, there is hope.